Town, San Antonio. I found a parking meter. I had to find change. I give a lot of my change away to the guys. I should keep it, but I got like 12 minutes on a parking meter. I put a dime in, and you get like 3 minutes. So I had like 30 cents. So it gave me 12 minutes, which is fine. I don't like it. Parking is difficult. Look, I just made a very pretty ride all the way through downtown San Antonio, and the river walk, I could actually catch it right here. I might walk down, show you the river walk real quick. There's one of the stairways, and just a few comments, little news things during the day when I do these. The House just passed, I think it was $8 billion for hurricane aid for Harvey, and I'm sure the Senate passed it. I think there were 3 people that voted against it. It's become somewhat of a political thing. Obviously, liberals will and have said to the Democrats and liberals have accused the Republicans of being hypocrites because some did not vote for the passage of hurricane relief for Sandy, New Jersey, Hurricane Sandy. And so that came out a lot, and that's a legitimate question to ask. The defense that those Republicans gave was the Democrats added a lot of other money to it. Those that know politics, meaning it wasn't just strictly for aid. And then they were asking the last few weeks, they said, how could you, look how pretty it is there. So they said, how could you now be asking for federal aid? I understand it's a legitimate argument, but again, it's politics, because right now there are other things that Democrats are going to be requesting along with. I watched a black, I think she was a mayor, she was a Democrat, from the exact city. It was dealing with the Houston floods, but also the flooding in Texas, and she was being interviewed on it was a national news interview. Oh, I'll walk down to the river walk real quick. Now look, very pretty here. I'd like to go more than 12 minutes, but my meter's going to run out. Here's the river walk. But in the interview, it was from Cokie Roberts, she was the daughter of one of the people that did the Warren Commission report on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. But Cokie Roberts is a well-known media figure. And they were interviewing this black woman, Democrat, along with a couple of other media people the other day. And they were trying to change the conversation into how Trump was at fault already because of certain things that dealt with Hurricane Harvey. Now, I knew it was going to come. I have already said, I've already seen articles where they've said Trump's, his decisions already that were made, which I predicted on the Paris Climate Accord and everything else. They already said that Trump was responsible. Some of the more liberal news outlets that I watch, which are Democracy Now! And all the stuff like that. But the black mayor, Democrat, when the national media, Cokie Roberts, when they tried to turn the conversation to it's Trump's fault, or he responded badly, or he came to Corpus Christi, Texas twice. Mike Pence, vice president, came once. The black liberal Democrat mayor, I believe she was a mayor, she just looked at Cokie Roberts because as they were saying, well, some might think it's too early for us to be critiquing Trump. It was in the middle of lives being lost. And the liberal black lady said to Cokie Roberts, I don't think this is the right time to be doing politics. She got rebuked by one of someone who probably holds to her political views, which I thought was interesting. You know, I watch the news a lot. I remember how when President Trump criticized certain decisions that were being made having to do with immigration and DACA, and there was a judge, I think his name was Curiel, Judge Curiel, I believe from California, and some of the judges made rulings that really were maybe politically motivated.
Do you remember?
And Trump said, well, because that judge, he's Mexican, and he also advocates strongly for certain immigration issues, we think the judge made a bad ruling, which he did make a bad ruling, as far as law was concerned, jurisprudence. And I'll never forget the national media, it was Scott Pelley on, I think he's CBS, but as they began mocking Trump, as they ended the newscast, they said, and Mr. Trump referred to Judge Curiel as a Mexican, and then they ended the newscast, this was months ago, by saying, Judge Curiel was born in the United States. And there were many people, liberal friends of mine, who are knowledgeable, and they began saying, how ignorant is Trump? He called someone born in the U.S., he referred to them as Mexican. And anybody born in the U.S. is an American citizen. And of course, we all know that. And Trump actually had to defend himself saying, look, I know he wasn't born in the U.S., he was born in the U.S., but it's his heritage that the judge himself is very active. And I hear the same media people constantly refer to African Americans, which is fine. And to say, here's an African American, not realizing, wait a minute, that person was not born in Africa. It's the game, and people swallow it. And that's what causes a lot of the division. Now, I hope you enjoy this is very pretty, the Riverwalk. I got about 3 minutes left on my meter. And so the psalm I'll add is the one I mentioned earlier. Whenever I'm in this area, because it's close to the Alamo, this is pretty. These trees, I have one of these in my backyard. You know, it's reminding me of a verse. I planted one of these cypress trees. I believe it's called the bald cypress. And there was a verse in Isaiah years ago, and it talks about promises that the roots will go down and the roots will go up. And I like that. It's kind of spoke about being, as Christians, being grounded in history, and also having that experience, that upward experience in the presence of God, which is kind of what the psalm I mentioned deals with. In God is my help. But we're also grounded, and that those trees make roots. I didn't show them to you, but they grow up out of the ground. And I planted one years ago in my yard. I bought it brand new at like Lowe's or one of the places. We bought a small cypress tree. In my yard now, it's a huge tree. It's a big tree. But I always attached, I'll try to find that verse for you. I always attached that scripture to the tree. Roots. What's that, brother?
Broadway?
Oh, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. Looking for Broadway. And some of the teachings coming up. Tomorrow I got a regular teaching post. It's one of the Sunday ones I did, but I did a lot of teaching on it. And I always try to mix in little church history. That's why at the end of some of those posts, I don't just put the Catholic verses that I expound on, but I put it in the Catholic form, because you can choose. You can just put the verses, from a regular Bible thing, or you could put the whole Catholic thing at the bottom. And I do that on purpose so we would also see what kind of rooted somewhat in history. I listened to, sometimes I'll watch a Catholic show on EWTN, Catholic station. I watch a show called The Journey Home. It's very enlightening. I haven't watched it in a while, but I watched it the other night. And it was someone who was raised Pentecostal and had the great experience of Pentecostal church. And then he became what we refer to as Reformed. He kind of left more of the Pentecostal Assembly of God type church and became part of the Reformed church. And the Reformed churches, which I've studied a lot of Reformed theology, there were a lot of intellectuals for Protestant churches. The original reformers, in many ways we refer to them as Reformed theology. And then he eventually became Catholic. But as I listened to his journey, he said when he started studying a lot of church history, St. Thomas Aquinas particularly, but also the Protestant reformers did the same thing. They appealed to what we call the church fathers, early centuries of the church. Now, the things that the early Christians wrote, the church fathers, those are not scripture, we agree. But yet they would look back, and even Luther and others, they didn't totally reject. If you read the writings of John Calvin and Luther, the other Protestant reformers in the 16th century, Zwingli, they didn't totally reject what the church fathers wrote and said. But the argument was, when it comes down to the final authority, scripture is the final authority. But they also quoted, meaning you learn from the roots. You understand? So here's my car. I think I figured I'd show you one from, you got to see, I'll title this The River Walk. And then, don't forget, Google CC Outreach 87. Google CC Outreach 87. And this is number 3. God bless.